Yes or a no? It's WCIT and ILF. Ladies and gentlemen, are we good to start?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We move on to yet another deep dive in new tech. Blockchain beyond cryptocurrencies. Promise and performance. I'm not going to talk much about it. We're having a wonderful, wonderful panel of leaders with us today. And I would like to introduce you to your panel of leaders. First and foremost, I would like to call upon on stage Mr. Danny Wettrich, Chairman of GreenBank. Sir, if you could join us on stage, and a huge round of applause.
Danny, you're the one who's fascinated me quite a lot in the few conversations you have together. I'm very interested to hear your views in terms of just even also first to start with cryptocurrencies, what blockchain can do, has done, and then beyond.
Right. So most people don't differentiate between blockchain and cryptocurrency. To most people, it's one and the same somehow, but it's very, very different. Clearly, blockchain started from the cryptocurrency perspective, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. But blockchain means so much more than cryptocurrency. The cryptocurrency issues, which you may or may not be aware of, the regulatory problems, the potential fraud issues, the wild speculative price on Bitcoin and Ethereum and others, is what causes all the publicity. But the real use case is the blockchain. In fact, blockchain, in my judgment, is revolutionary. It has the ability to totally transform both the commercial and governmental space. I think every potential industry you can think of can be positively affected by blockchain usage. The key, in my judgment, and in the judgment of GreenBank, the company I head up, is that the multiple use cases of blockchain need to have identification attached to it. Every conceivable use case you can make has to have identification, whether it's healthcare for patient purposes, whether it's government for social security payments, whatever you like to think of, some form of identification has to be attached to either a smart contract or a use case or transmitting data. Bottom line is, without identification, blockchain is partially complete. We spent over 3 years creating an identification-based blockchain. We think that's the future. With identification, blockchain has multiple uses in multiple industries, in multiple jurisdictions, including governments. So the potential is quite revolutionary. I think we are actually at the equivalent of the early stages of the internet. It's that dramatic a situation. It will transform industries and countries quite dramatically.
Danny, thank you very much. I think if I were to repeat one statement, it says that blockchain is the new internet, or kind of thing. So that's the kind of profound impact it can have. I, as a moderator, have been told to keep my brains outside, so I'm not going to contribute. This is a nice panelist here. Danny, come back on the
Well, I have a problem with the emphasis of the discussion being focused on banks and money transmission. Because
my God, these bankers have overtaken it.
That's basically a cryptocurrency discussion. And can you or can you not move money quickly? Can you move it securely? Can you use the crypto concept by saving money and transmitting it in an obscure way? The conversation is crypto. I think there's a place for discussion on crypto. I don't think it's part of this panel. The panel discussion is beyond cryptocurrency.
Yep.
And my contention is...
Round of applause for Danny.
My contention is that the discussion with cryptocurrency is interesting, and I think it attracts a lot of publicity because it's a very controversial area. But the emphasis on bank blockchains, money transmission, it's just a part of the potential that blockchain usage can encompass. The real benefits of blockchain are industry-wide, governmental-wide. It saves costs dramatically. It speeds up transactions. It produces permanent audit trails. If you add identification to all these various aspects, which I think is critical, you have a revolutionary system that can transform everything from auditing to social security payments to industrial inventory management. You name it, it has an impact on it. And so the discussion gets lost with banks trying to figure out ways that they can get into the space. Quite frankly, in my judgment, a lot of banks don't want to get in the space because it's transformative. There'll be a lot of employees laid off if the banks really absorb this. So there's some issues here which are negative from the banking space. And in many cases, in my judgment, we get lost in the weeds if we start talking about money transmission. There's a lot more to it if you talk about blockchain in a big perspective.
Danny, I love you because I think you kind of completely eliminated the pitch for hiring more people. So Pranendra, you're going to lose all those people. They'll get laid off if banks started to do it. I'll not get into that much further because that can get political. But I think I'll just pick up the point which you mentioned, that beyond banking, and also the use cases being immense and lots of dollars to be saved because it can eliminate a lot of intermediaries. It can actually create an immutable audit trail and many of those benefits.
Can I just add one more thing, which I think is important, and that is this: that when you hear about how much money has been thrown into the blockchain space, I want to emphasize that it's not money that's going to fix the problem; it's brain power. Yeah. And you don't need to throw $100 million at a blockchain project in order to figure out what to do. Remember, Apple Computer started in a garage somewhere with one guy, okay? And look at it today. The issue is not necessarily throwing money at the problem. The issue is to figure out the logistical structure around the blockchain, how to implement it, and that doesn't necessarily require 1,000 people to figure out how to do it.
Actually, I want to second, even though I was asked to keep the brains outside the room as a moderator, is you mentioned about Apple starting in a garage. If you actually look at it, the Bitcoin history, in fact, it didn't need $100 million to start with. It's somebody who we don't even know where does it exist kind of started, and it's a big network right now, and people are losing tons of money. Anybody would like to take the remaining two questions?
Well, I also think elections are a very good example of why identification is needed. Clearly, if the population is voting, they have to be identified, and they have to be identified in a secure manner. So that's where, in a sense, it ties in with this question about privacy. You can have a blockchain which is available to the user base. The user base knows that whatever identification information they put in is private to a third party, but is available to, in the case of an election, to the government. So the government knows how you voted. It knows who you are because it's KYC identification attached to the process and to the blockchain. But the next door neighbor can't find out how you voted because all they can see is there's a particular record and they can't access it without the appropriate passwords and protections. So the answer is yes, the blockchain is perfect for electoral voting as long as identification is part of it. That applies to most of the scenarios we're talking about.
Sure. All right, so I'm going to ask this question to somebody who's already invested in it. Danny, if you were to yet again go back and live your life 3 years ago and say you want to buy this blockchain product, technology or something, what are the questions you're going to ask before you get in there?
I would have asked myself, how difficult is it to get identification embedded into a blockchain? Because without that, I think blockchains are basically a nice story. I mean, ultimately, what is a blockchain? It's an audit trail of transactions and or contracts and or data, okay? And that's fine, but a ledger system has its limitations. If you don't attach various types of identification along the chain, it becomes pretty useless. So if I had asked myself the question when I started this journey 3.5 years ago, I underestimated how complicated it is to do identification in a secure manner which is accessible for the individual usage base, whichever that particular blockchain applies to. We started based on the concept of a cryptocurrency that was identified because we saw that as the only way that cryptocurrencies would ever be acceptable to governments and regulators. That led us to create a blockchain based on identification, and then we moved on to the blockchain business, which is frankly potentially enormous. So we're in a situation, I think, where if someone wants to invest in a blockchain product, the answer is, what's the end usage case? And if you establish what the end usage case is, how likely is it to succeed if the various attributes required in that particular industry are not there? And I keep coming back to the same issue again and again, because whatever you look at, you've got to have somehow or other build KYC identification into a blockchain, otherwise you're all running around in circles.
Before I let all of you guys go and have this distinguished panelists to go, my last question to all of you. Bitcoin, buy or sell?
No comments.
No comments. He's not playing the game. Danny?
Avoid.
Avoid.
Just play with it.
Play with it.
No comments.
No comments. See? See, this is the only question which we didn't rehearse, okay? No, I'm just kidding. I put them on the blog. With that, ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together for this absolutely wonderful panel.